I stood in my kitchen phone pressed to my ear when my future daughter-in-law Ashley delivered the words that shattered my heart. "When's the wedding?" I'd asked, already picturing myself helping with flower arrangements. "Oh, we got married yesterday," she chirped. "Just for special people." The silence that followed felt like a knife twisting in my chest. 25 years of being the perfect mother, sacrificing everything for my son, Brian, and I wasn't even special enough to watch him say, "I do." The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, illuminating the same worn linoleum I'd been meaning to replace for 15 years. But there had always been something more important to spend money on. Brian's football cleats, Brian's college textbooks, Brian's graduation suit, always Brian. I set down my coffee mug with trembling hands, Ashley's words still echoing in my mind. Special people. After everything I'd done, I wasn't special enough to witness my only child's wedding. My mind drifted back 22 years to the day my world shifted forever. The police officer at my door hat in hand telling me there had been an accident at the construction site. My husband Tom gone in an instant. Brian was only 3, barely old enough to understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. From that moment, my life became about survival and sacrifice. I took double shifts at the hospital where I worked as an administrator. While other nurses complained about 16-hour days, I gratefully accepted every extra hour. Time and a half meant new school shoes for Brian. Holiday pay meant Christmas presents under the tree. I remember the weight of my grandmother's pearl necklace in my hands, the one she'd worn on her wedding day, the one she'd placed around my neck before she died. "For your daughter someday," she'd whispered. But there would be no daughter. There would barely be money for Brian's college. The pawnshop owner offered me $2,000. I took it without hesitation. Brian's chemistry textbook cost $300 that semester. Every Thursday night for 15 years, I sat in those hard metal bleachers watching my boy play football. My supervisor at the hospital had offered me a promotion that would have required Thursday evening meetings. I turned it down. Some other time, I told her knowing there wouldn't be another offer. But Brian needed to see my face in the crowd. He needed to know someone was cheering just for him. The house told our story in what wasn't there. No new furniture since Tom died. The same faded floral couch his mother had given us as a wedding gift. The kitchen cabinets I'd painted white to hide the water stains, repainting them every few years when the damage showed through. My bedroom with its single bed because I'd given Brian the master room when he became a teenager. Growing boys need space. I told him not mentioning that mothers sometimes needed space too. I dated exactly twice after Tom died. Once when Brian was 8, a nice accountant named Jeffrey, who brought flowers and opened doors. Brian threw such a tantrum that Jeffrey never called again. The second time, when Brian was 15, I went to dinner with Dr. Morrison from the hospital. Brian gave me the silent treatment for a week. After that, I stopped trying. My son needed stability, not a stepfather. "Mom, when I'm successful, I'll take care of you," Brian would say, usually when he needed something. Those words became my anthem, my reason for every sacrifice. When I wore the same winter coat for 10 years, I thought of those words. When I ate ramen for lunch to save money for his car insurance, I held on to that promise. But now staring at my phone, I wondered when I'd become someone who wasn't even worth inviting to her son's wedding. My hands shook as I scrolled through my text messages. Just last week, Brian had sent me a message that now felt like a cruel joke. I'd asked about wedding planning, offered to help with catering costs. His response was brief. "Ashley's handling everything, Mom. Just show up and enjoy." Just show up, except they hadn't even given me that chance. I flipped through my photos, stopping at one from Brian's college graduation 2 years ago. There he stood, diploma in hand, that $1,000,000 smile that looked just like his father's. And beside him, Ashley already possessively holding his arm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The front door opened, startling me from my memories. Margaret bustled in without knocking the way only a best friend of 30 years could. She took one look at my face and knew. "What happened?" she asked, setting down her purse and immediately moving to the coffee pot. Brian got married yesterday. I said the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Margaret froze coffee pot suspended in midair. What do you mean got married? The wedding's not until June. Apparently it was yesterday. For special people only. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Margaret set the pot down with more force than necessary. That little witch. I told you there was something off about her. I wanted to defend Ashley the way I always did. She's just young. She's still figuring things out. She makes Brian happy, but the words wouldn't come. Remember what I said at Brian's graduation? Margaret continued pouring coffee with aggressive precision. That girl has calculating eyes, the way she looked at your house, at your car, like she was doing mental math. I dismissed Margaret's concerns back then. She was protective, maybe even a little jealous that someone else was becoming important in my life. But now, sitting in my kitchen excluded from my son's wedding, I wondered if I'd been blind. My phone buzzed. A text from Brian. Mom, I know you're probably upset about the wedding. Ashley thought it would be better this way. Less stress for everyone. We'll celebrate with you later. Less stress for everyone. As if I was some burden to be managed rather than his mother. I showed Margaret the text. She read it, her face darkening with each word. Less stress. You worked yourself to the bone for that boy. You gave up everything. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Diane, when was the last time Brian did something for you? Not promises, not words. Something real. I opened my mouth to respond to list all the ways my son showed he cared. But as I searched my memory, I found only more promises, more some days, more laters. He sent me flowers on Mother's Day, I offered weakly. Ashley sent those flowers. Brian's name was just on the card, Margaret said gently. I saw the charge on her social media. She posted about being such a thoughtful daughter-in-law. Another buzz. This time, a notification from social media. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There they were. Wedding photos already uploaded. Ashley in a designer dress that must have cost more than I made in 3 months. Brian in a tuxedo I'd never seen before. 50 guests raising champagne glasses. And in every photo, Ashley's mysterious family members I'd been told didn't exist. But what gutted me wasn't their absence of guilt or shame. It was the caption under the main photo, finally married to my soulmate, so grateful to be surrounded by the people who really matter. Margaret read over my shoulder, her grip tightening on her coffee mug. That manipulative little... Don't, I said quietly. He's still my son. Your son who just publicly humiliated you, Margaret shot back. Diane, this isn't normal. This is cruel. I wanted to argue, to make excuses, to find some explanation that didn't involve accepting that my son had deliberately excluded me from the most important day of his life. But as I scrolled through more photos, seeing Brian's colleagues, seeing Ashley's friends, seeing complete strangers who had somehow made the special people list, the truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't special to my son anymore. Maybe I never had been. My phone rang again. This time it was my cousin Patricia calling from Florida. I almost didn't answer, not wanting to explain why I was crying on a Tuesday morning. But Patricia rarely called unless something was wrong. Diane, honey, I'm worried about you, she said without preamble. Are you okay? These emails you've been sending. What emails? I asked, confusion temporarily displacing my grief. The ones about needing money for Brian's medical bills, saying he was in an accident. Patricia's voice was concerned but cautious. My blood ran cold. Patricia, I haven't sent you any emails. Brian's fine. He just got married yesterday. Silence on the other end. Then, Diane, I've gotten 3 emails from your account this month, each one asking for money for different emergencies. Margaret, who could hear Patricia's voice, grabbed my laptop and started typing furiously. Within minutes, she'd pulled up my email sent folder. Empty. But when she checked the trash, there they were. Dozens of emails I'd never written, sent to family members I barely kept in touch with, each one crafting elaborate stories of financial distress. Someone's been accessing your email, Margaret said grimly. and I bet I know exactly who. I thought about all the times Ashley had borrowed my laptop. "Just need to check something quickly," she'd say with that sweet smile. I never thought twice about it. As I reassured Patricia and promised to look into the email situation, a terrible thought began to form. If Ashley had been sending emails from my account, what else had she been doing? And more importantly, why hadn't Brian noticed or cared that his fiancée was impersonating his mother? The morning that had started with heartbreak was spiraling into something darker, but I was still thinking like a mother, still making excuses, still hoping there was some reasonable explanation. I wouldn't stay naive for long. The memory of meeting Ashley felt like watching a movie of someone else's life now. 2 years ago, Brian had called with such excitement in his voice. "Mom, I met someone. She's perfect. You're going to love her." I'd been folding laundry in the same kitchen, the phone wedged between my shoulder and ear hands, automatically creasing his work shirts the way he liked them. Even at 25, he still brought his laundry home every other week. "Tell me about her," I'd said, genuinely happy to hear joy in his voice. He'd been so focused on his career at the investment firm, I'd worried he wasn't making time for relationships. "Her name's Ashley Wellington. She's from Greenwich, old money, but down to earth. Lost her parents in a car accident when she was young, raised by her grandmother who passed last year. She understands loss, Mom. She gets it." Those words had softened me immediately. Someone who understood the hollow ache of losing the people who were supposed to be there forever. When Brian brought her for dinner that first Sunday, I was prepared to love her. And at first it was so easy. Ashley walked into my home bearing homemade banana bread and wearing a modest sundress. Her handshake was firm, her smile warm. "Mrs. Peterson, I've heard so much about you. Brian says you're the strongest woman he knows." "Please call me Diane," I'd said, charmed by her manners. "Or Mom, if you're comfortable with that." The flash of something in her eyes should have been my first warning, but it was gone so quickly, replaced by what seemed like grateful tears. "I'd love that. I've missed having a mom." That dinner was perfect. Ashley helped set the table without being asked, complimented my pot roast recipe, and listened with what appeared to be genuine interest as I told stories about Brian's childhood. She laughed at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions, and even insisted on doing the dishes. "You've done enough, Mom," she'd said, the title rolling off her tongue like honey. "Let me take care of this." Brian had watched us with such contentment, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of a complete family again. Over the following months, Ashley seemed to seamlessly integrate into our lives. She remembered my birthday, showed up with soup when I had a cold, and always asked about my day at the hospital. Brian started dressing better, speaking with more confidence, talking about 5-year plans and investment portfolios. But there were cracks, if you knew where to look. The first time I noticed something off was at Brian's company picnic. Ashley was telling a group of his colleagues about her childhood in Greenwich, about the country club and the sailing lessons. But when someone asked which club, she smoothly changed the subject. Later, when Brian's boss's wife, who actually was from Greenwich, tried to connect over shared acquaintances, Ashley suddenly needed to use the restroom. "Such a lovely girl," the woman had said to me afterward, "though I'm surprised we never crossed paths. Greenwich is smaller than people think." Then there was the matter of her grandmother's estate. Ashley spoke often about inheriting her grandmother's house, how she was turning it into an investment property. But when I offered to help her sort through paperwork, having dealt with estate issues after Tom's death, she always had excuses. "Oh, the lawyers are handling everything," she'd say, or "it's still too painful to deal with." Margaret noticed things I'd missed or dismissed. "She never has photos," she pointed out after another Sunday dinner. "Everyone our age has boxes of family photos. Where are her parents' wedding pictures? Her childhood Christmas mornings?" She lost everything in the accident. I defended, though even then something felt off about the explanation. The transformation in Brian happened gradually. Designer clothes appeared in his wardrobe. "Ashley says image is everything in finance," he explained when I commented on the expensive watch. He started talking about upgrading things. His car wasn't good enough anymore. His apartment was entry level. Even my neighborhood was due for gentrification. "Since when do you care about these things?" I'd asked, hurt by his dismissal of the home where he'd grown up. "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. Ashley's showing me how to think bigger." The incident with the driver's license happened 6 months after they'd been dating. We were at a nice restaurant celebrating Brian's promotion. Ashley had ordered an expensive bottle of wine, insisting it was her treat. As she reached across the table to pour, her elbow knocked over her glass, sending red wine cascading across the white tablecloth and into her open purse. "Oh no," she cried, grabbing napkins. "My leather bag." I immediately helped both of us, pulling items from her purse to save them from the wine. Wallet, makeup, phone. In the chaos, her wallet fell open, and I found myself staring at a driver's license that read, Ashley Marie Brennan, with an address in Newark, New Jersey. Our eyes met for just a moment. She knew I'd seen it. "My old license," she said smoothly, taking it from my frozen hands. "I really should throw that away. Just got my new one with my legal name after the estate finally cleared. Brennan was my mother's maiden name. I used it for a while after my parents died. Too painful to be a Wellington, you know." The explanation made perfect sense. Brian didn't even look up from his phone, but something in Ashley's eyes warned me not to push further. The next week, I couldn't shake my unease. During my lunch break at the hospital, I did something I'd never done before. I Googled Ashley Wellington from Greenwich. Nothing. No obituaries for her parents, no social media presence before 2 years ago, no record of the prominent Wellington family she claimed to belong to. When I searched Ashley Brennan from Newark, I found a single hit: a high school yearbook photo from a public school known for its rough reputation. The girl in the photo looked like Ashley, but harder somehow. Hungry. I told myself I was being paranoid. People reinvent themselves. Maybe she was embarrassed about her real background. Brian was happy. That's what mattered. But then came the casino incident. My neighbor Carol was what we politely called a free spirit. Retired early from her husband's life insurance, she spent her time between Atlantic City and Las Vegas. She knew every casino within a 3-hour radius and wasn't shy about sharing her adventures. "Diane," she called out one afternoon as I was getting my mail, "you'll never guess who I saw at the Borgata last weekend." I assumed she was about to tell me about some celebrity sighting. Carol was always claiming to have seen famous people at the slot machines. That lovely girlfriend of Brian's, though she wasn't with Brian, had some silver fox on her arm. Big spender, too, throwing hundreds at the roulette table like they were singles. My stomach dropped. "Are you sure it was Ashley?" "Honey, I may be old, but I'm not blind. That red dress she wore to your 4th of July barbecue, same one. Nearly said hello, but something about the way she was acting made me think twice. Very cozy with the gentleman, if you know what I mean." Brian had been in Chicago that weekend for a conference. I remembered because Ashley had called to say she was going to use the time to visit her grandmother's grave in Connecticut. When I carefully, casually mentioned seeing Carol the next time Ashley was over, she didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Carol, such a character. Though Brian mentioned she's been having some memory issues, didn't she insist she saw you at the mall last month when you were at work?" There had been no such incident, but Brian nodded along. "Yeah, Mom, her daughter's worried about her. Early dementia runs in their family." The seed of doubt about Carol's reliability was planted so expertly that even I wondered if she'd been mistaken. But I started watching Ashley more carefully after that. She had a tell when she was lying. A tiny touch to her earlobe so quick most people would miss it. But I'd spent 25 years reading the faces of hospital administrators and insurance adjusters. I knew when someone was spinning a story. The touches to her earlobe came when she talked about her family, when she mentioned her trust fund, when she explained why none of her old friends could make it to various events, when she told Brian she was working late at her marketing job that no one had ever seen. What exactly does Ashley do? I asked Brian one evening when he'd stopped by for dinner alone. Digital marketing consulting. He said the words sounding rehearsed. She works with international clients, so her hours are weird. Which company? She's freelance, building her own empire. He said it with such pride as if her vague non-answers were evidence of entrepreneurial spirit rather than deception. That's when I started documenting things. Nothing dramatic, just mental notes that gradually became actual notes in a journal I hid in my bedroom. The stories that didn't add up. The expensive gifts Brian bought her despite his salary. The way she redirected every conversation about her past or her work. Margaret thought I was finally seeing sense. "She's playing a long game," she warned. "I've seen it before. My cousin in Texas, same thing happened. Charming woman swept in, isolated him from family, drained his accounts, then vanished." But Ashley wasn't vanishing. She was burrowing deeper into Brian's life, and by extension, mine. The weekend before the secret wedding, Ashley had been particularly attentive. She'd brought me flowers, helped me organize the garage, even suggested we have a mother-daughter spa day. "I want us to be close," she'd said, holding my hands in both of hers. "You're the only mother I have now." Looking back, I realized she was saying goodbye. Or maybe she was gloating. Either way, as I sat in my kitchen that Tuesday morning, excluded from my son's wedding, I finally understood what Margaret had seen from the beginning. Ashley Wellington or Brennan or whoever she really was hadn't just stolen my son. She'd orchestrated the theft so carefully that he'd walked willingly into her web, taking with him 25 years of sacrifices I'd made in his name. But I still didn't know the full extent of her plans. That revelation was yet to come. The campaign to separate me from Brian started subtly like a leak you don't notice until the ceiling caves in. Looking back, I can trace the timeline with painful clarity, each incident seemingly innocent until you stepped back and saw the pattern. It began 3 months after the casino incident. Ashley had moved in with Brian, and suddenly their calendar was always full. Sunday dinners, our sacred tradition since he'd moved out, became sporadic. "Sorry, Mom, Ashley got us tickets to that new show downtown." Brian would text an hour before he was supposed to arrive. Or, "Ashley's feeling under the weather. Rain check." At first I understood. New relationships needed space to grow. But then the exceptions became the rule. My birthday fell on a Saturday that year. For 26 years, Brian had never missed it. Even during college finals, he'd driven 3 hours to surprise me. I'd planned a small dinner, nothing fancy, just his favorite lasagna and the chocolate cake I'd made him since he was 5. "Can't wait for Saturday," he'd said the week before. "Ashley has something special planned, too." I spent Friday evening preparing humming while I cooked, imagining the evening ahead. The doorbell rang at noon on Saturday. A delivery man stood there with a bouquet and a card. "Happy birthday, Mom. So sorry, but Ashley surprised me with a couple's retreat this weekend. Completely forgot when I told her about it. We'll celebrate next week. Love, Brian." The lasagna went into the freezer. The cake I couldn't bear to look at. Margaret found me sitting at my set dining table at 6, that evening, still in my good dress, staring at 3 place settings. "He forgot," I said unnecessarily. Margaret didn't say what we both knew. Brian had never forgotten anything important in his life. He kept spreadsheets for his fantasy football league and could recite stats from games 5 years ago. This wasn't forgetting. This was choosing. The pattern escalated. When I'd call to invite them for Thanksgiving, Ashley would answer Brian's phone. "Oh, Diane, Brian's in the shower. Thanksgiving sounds lovely, but we already committed to my friend's house. You understand?" When I'd text Brian directly, the response would come hours later. "Mom, Ashley told you we have plans. Why are you trying to make this difficult?" Make this difficult, I'd cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 26 years. Now I was difficult for wanting to continue the tradition. Christmas was worse. They agreed to stop by in the morning, but showed up at 3 in the afternoon just as Margaret and I were cleaning up from the dinner they'd missed. Traffic was insane. Ashley explained, though, the roads had been empty when Margaret arrived. "We can only stay an hour. My friends are having a party." Brian hugged me perfunctorily, like a duty to be discharged. They left with the presents I'd carefully wrapped, but didn't stay to see me open theirs, a generic bath set that still had the clearance sticker on the bottom. "She's isolating him," Margaret said after they left. "Classic manipulation. make the family seem like an obligation, not a joy. But the masterstroke came in March. I'd been having headaches, nothing serious, just the stress of too many 12-hour shifts. I mentioned it to Brian during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. 2 days later, he showed up at my door with Ashley and a look of concern that seemed rehearsed. "Mom, we need to talk about your health," he said, settling into the living room like an intervention. "My health is fine," I replied, confused by their formal tone. Ashley leaned forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Diane, Brian told me about your confusion lately. The headaches, the forgotten conversations. We're worried." What forgotten conversations? They exchanged a look that made my skin crawl. Brian pulled out his phone, scrolling to what appeared to be a list. "Last Tuesday, you called me 3 times asking the same question about my work schedule. Thursday, you told Ashley you were making dinner for us, but when we showed up, you seemed surprised. And Carol mentioned you've been acting strange." None of that was true. I'd called him once on Tuesday and he hadn't answered. I'd never invited them for dinner on Thursday. And Carol had been avoiding me since Ashley suggested she had dementia. "Brian, I don't know what you're talking about," I said slowly, a cold fear creeping up my spine. "See, this is what we mean," Ashley said gently. "It's okay to forget things, but we think you should see someone. My friend's mother had similar symptoms before her Alzheimer's diagnosis." The word hung in the air like a poison. Alzheimer's. My grandmother had suffered from it, spent her last years not recognizing anyone. They knew my family history. They knew my deepest fear. "I'm 58 years old," I said firmly. "I run a department at the hospital. I manage budgets and schedules for 40 people. I'm not having memory issues." But the seed was planted. Every time I contradicted something, Ashley said she'd give Brian that look. When I mentioned plans we'd discussed that they claimed not to remember, Brian would get a worried crease between his brows. The gaslighting was so skillful that even I started to doubt myself. I began writing everything down, keeping detailed records of every conversation. Not because I was forgetting, but because I needed proof of my own sanity. The situation with my house escalated everything to a new level of cruelty. It happened during Thanksgiving, the one I ended up spending alone because they'd gone to Ashley's fictional friend's dinner. Brian had stopped by the day before alone for once. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his keys the way he had as a teenager when he dented my car. "Mom, I need your help," he said, and for a moment he looked like my little boy again. "Anything," I replied, and I meant it. Despite everything, he was still my son. "Ashley's been working on this amazing investment opportunity, a real estate flip that could set us up for life. But we need collateral for the loan." He pulled out a folder thick with official-looking documents. "The bank just needs to see we have assets. You won't actually be risking anything. It's just paperwork." I should have read every line, should have called a lawyer, should have done anything except trust the son I'd raised. But he was looking at me with those same eyes that had begged for one more bedtime story, one more push on the swing, one more chance to get it right. "It's just a formality," he assured me. "You'll sign as a guarantor, but we'll make all the payments. You know I'd never put your home at risk, Mom." The papers were dense with legal jargon. My eyes were tired from a long shift. Brian kept pointing to signature lines explaining in soothing tones how this was standard procedure, how proud he was that I trusted him, how this would help them start their family in a stable place. "Ashley wants kids soon," he mentioned casually as I signed. "We want to do it right, not not struggling like you had to." The comparison stung as intended. Yes, we'd struggled, but we'd been happy, hadn't we? I signed every document he put in front of me. It wasn't until 3 months later, when the foreclosure notice arrived, that I understood what I'd done. The papers weren't for collateral. They were deed transfers. I'd signed my house, my one asset, my security, over to Brian and Ashley. But on that March afternoon, as they staged their memory intervention, I didn't yet know about the house. I only knew that something was terribly wrong with how my son looked at me. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than the mother who'd walked him through nightmares and cheered at every small victory. "We've been looking at some nice assisted living communities," Ashley said, producing glossy brochures, "places where you'd be safe monitored, where they can help with your confusion." "I'm not confused," I repeated, but even to my own ears, I sounded defensive, exactly how a confused person would sound. Brian reached for my hand, and I let him take it. His fingers were soft, unmarked by the calluses his father had carried. "Mom, we only want what's best for you. Maybe it's time to start planning for the future." The future, where my house would be theirs, and I'd be locked away in some facility too confused to object. The plan was so transparent once I saw it, but wrapped in concern and family love, it had almost worked. Almost. After they left that day, I sat in my quiet house and made a decision. I wouldn't let them see my tears anymore. I wouldn't beg for scraps of my son's attention, and I certainly wouldn't go quietly into whatever institution they'd picked out for me. But first, I had to understand exactly what I was fighting. The discovery of their secret wedding was devastating. The revelation about my house was yet to come, and somewhere in the shadows of Ashley's past lay the key to everything. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Patricia in Florida deserved to know about those emails, and maybe, just maybe, she could help me understand how deep this deception went. The isolation had been systematic, surgical, complete, but isolation works both ways. While they'd been cutting me off from Brian, they'd also freed me from the illusion that I was dealing with anything resembling a normal family dynamic. This was war, and for the first time in 25 years, I wasn't fighting for Brian. I was fighting for myself. The Tuesday morning when Ashley delivered news of their secret wedding was just the beginning of a carefully orchestrated humiliation. As I sat at my kitchen table, still reeling from those words, "just for special people," my phone began buzzing with notifications. Social media had exploded with wedding photos. Ashley, it seemed, had waited until exactly 9 in the morning to unleash a flood of images across every platform. The timing wasn't accidental. She knew I'd be home from my night shift, knew I'd be awake, knew I'd see everything in real time. The first photo stopped my breath. Brian, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo I'd never seen before Ashley, in what looked like a $20,000 dress, standing beneath an arch of white roses at the Riverside Country Club, the same venue where I'd once catered a hospital fundraiser, working a 12-hour shift, serving champagne to people who spent more on appetizers than I made in a week. The caption twisted the knife deeper. "Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. So blessed to be surrounded by our true family on this perfect day." True family. There was Brian's boss raising a toast, his college roommate as best man, Ashley's mysterious aunt from Boston, the one who supposedly didn't exist. Row after row of faces I didn't recognize, all dressed in their finest, all sharing in the moment I dreamed of since holding Brian as a newborn. Margaret peered over my shoulder as I scrolled her coffee, growing cold in her hand. Each photo was worse than the last. There was Brian dancing with Ashley's aunt, the mother-son dance I'd never have. There was the cake cutting the bouquet, tossed the speeches I couldn't hear, but could see bringing tears to strangers' eyes. "Look at this one," Margaret said quietly, pointing to a photo of the gift table. I zoomed in, my heart sinking further. Elaborate packages wrapped in silver and gold envelopes, thick with what were surely generous checks. The wedding I'd been saving for putting $20 aside each month for 5 years hadn't needed my contribution after all. Then I found the video clips. Ashley had hired a professional videographer who was already posting sneak peeks. Brian's speech to his new wife played automatically. "Ashley, you've shown me what it means to put the future first, to stop being held back by the past, to build something new and beautiful with the person who truly understands ambition and success." Held back by the past, was that what I was to him now, the past? Comments poured in under each post. "Such a beautiful couple. Your real family is so proud. About time you found someone who matches your energy. Brian, love wins. So glad you didn't let anyone's negativity affect your special day. That last comment was from someone named Derek who appeared in several photos. When I clicked on his profile, I discovered he was Ashley's ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. Still close enough to attend her wedding, still friendly enough to take shots at the mother-in-law who hadn't made the guest list. My cousin Patricia called while I was torturing myself with the photos. "Diane, honey, I just saw online. Brian got married." The sympathy in her voice broke something inside me. "Yesterday, I found out this morning. You weren't there." The shock in her voice validated what I already knew. This wasn't normal. This wasn't okay. Apparently, it was only for special people, and after 26 years of being his mother, I didn't qualify. Patricia's silence spoke volumes. Finally, she said, "That's not the Brian I remember. The boy who made you breakfast in bed every Mother's Day, who wrote that essay in high school about you being his hero. That Brian's gone." I admitted the words tasting like ash. "Ashley's created a new version." As we talked, more notifications flooded in. Ashley had tagged me in exactly one photo, ensuring all my friends and distant relatives would see it. The image showed her and Brian at what was clearly their engagement party, another event I hadn't been invited to. The caption read, "So grateful for all the family who have supported our journey even from afar." From afar, like I was some distant relative who couldn't be bothered to show up. My hospital colleagues started texting confused and concerned. These were people who'd listened to me talk about Brian for years, who'd covered my shifts so I could attend his graduations and important moments. Now they were seeing wedding photos that didn't include me trying to make sense of something senseless. "Take the week off," my supervisor texted after the 5th person called her asking if I was okay. Family situations are valid reasons for personal leave. Family situations. Is that what you called it when your family decided you weren't family anymore? The phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Jennifer from the Riverside Country Club. I'm calling about the balance on yesterday's event." "I'm sorry, what balance?" "The Peterson-Wellington wedding. There's an outstanding balance of $8,000. Mr. Peterson said you'd be handling the final payment since it was your gift to the couple." The room spun. There must be some mistake. I didn't. Oh dear, I hope there hasn't been a miscommunication. Mr. Peterson was very clear that you'd arranged this as your wedding gift. He said you'd be calling today with the credit card information. I hung up without responding, my hands shaking. $8,000. Brian had charged $8,000 to an account in my name for a wedding he didn't invite me to. Before I could process this new betrayal, Ashley posted another update. This time, it was a photo of a legal document, their marriage certificate official and binding. But what caught my eye was the witness signature. Carol, my neighbor Carol, who Ashley had convinced everyone was suffering from dementia, had been at my son's wedding. I stumbled outside needing air and found Carol in her garden. She saw me coming and had the grace to look ashamed. "Diane, I can explain. You were there. It wasn't a question." Carol set down her gardening shears, her face flushing. "Ashley came by last week, said they were doing a small ceremony family only. She said you knew that you were fine with it, but that you had to work. She was so convincing, and she said they needed one more witness. And you didn't think to check with me after 30 years as neighbors?" "She said you were having memory issues," Carol whispered, "that you might not remember agreeing to miss it. I thought I was helping." The gaslighting had spread like a virus, infecting everyone around me. Even Carol, who'd known me since Brian was in diapers, believed I was losing my mind rather than being systematically excluded. I walked back to my house in a daze. Inside, Margaret was on her laptop, her expression grim. "You need to see this," she said, turning the screen toward me. Ashley had a wedding website. Of course she did. But the Our Story section made me physically ill. According to this revisionist history, Brian had overcome a difficult childhood with an overbearing single mother who couldn't let go, to find true love with Ashley, who understood the importance of boundaries and building an independent life. There were photos I'd never seen before. Brian and Ashley on vacations I didn't know they'd taken, celebrating anniversaries at restaurants I'd suggested we try together, living a parallel life that deliberately excluded me. But the worst part was the family section. Ashley's Aunt Martha featured prominently described as the mother figure Ashley needed after her tragic loss. Brian had written a paragraph about how Martha had shown him what healthy family relationships look like. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. "Mom, I know you saw the photos. This is why we didn't tell you. We knew you'd make it all about yourself. When you're ready to be happy for us instead of playing the victim, let us know." Playing the victim. After years of sacrifice, I was playing the victim for being hurt that my only child had secretly married without telling me. The week that followed was a masterclass in public humiliation. Ashley posted daily honeymoon highlights from Maui, a trip that cost more than I'd spent on vacations in my entire life. Each post garnered hundreds of likes and comments about what a beautiful couple they made, how they deserved this happiness, how wonderful it was to see Brian free to be himself. Then came the rental situation. 7 days after the wedding, as I was finally starting to process the reality that my son had chosen to exclude me from his life, Ashley called. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was syrupy sweet, as if the past week hadn't happened. "Hope you're doing better. Listen, tiny problem, the rent on your property is overdue. Did Brian forget to mention you need to transfer it?" "What rent? What property?" A pause perfectly timed. "Oh no, did Brian not explain? Well, this is awkward. Since you transferred the deed to us, you're technically our tenant now. The monthly rent is $3,000. We're running a business here, not a charity. Though family gets a discount, of course. Ashley, this is my house. I've lived here for 25 years. Was your house, she corrected cheerfully. But don't worry, we're not monsters. The rent is retroactive to when you signed the papers, so you only owe us $12,000 for the past 4 months. We can put you on a payment plan." The line went dead as I stood frozen phone still pressed to my ear. $12,000 in back rent for my own home. The home I'd already paid off through decades of double shifts and skipped meals. Margaret, who'd heard the whole conversation, was already pulling up property records on her laptop. Within minutes, she found it. The deed transfer filed 3 months ago, making Brian and Ashley full owners of my house. "This can't be legal," she muttered, reading through the details. "You were coerced. We'll get a lawyer." But as I looked at my signature on the documents clear as day, I knew the truth. I'd signed willingly, trusting my son, believing his lies about investment opportunities. No court would see coercion where a mother's blind faith had been. The secret wedding hadn't just excluded me from a celebration. It had been the victory lap, the public declaration that Ashley had won. She'd taken my son, my dignity, and now my home. But as I stood in what was no longer my kitchen looking at photos of strangers celebrating what should have been my joy, something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. The shaking stilled. And for the first time in my life, I felt something harder than heartbreak. I felt rage. Pure, clarifying rage. "Didn't I tell you?" I whispered to myself, remembering Ashley's words about the rent. A plan began forming piece by piece, because Ashley had made one crucial mistake in her perfect scheme. She'd taught me that family meant nothing, and a woman with nothing left to lose was a dangerous thing indeed. "Margaret." I said, my voice steady for the first time all week. "I need you to call your daughter at the courthouse. The one who found those marriage records. I have some questions about Ashley's past marriages." Margaret looked at me, recognizing something new in my expression. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time I stopped being the victim they've painted me as." I picked up my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found what I needed. And I'm thinking Ashley Wellington Brennan Peterson might have more secrets than she realizes. The wedding had been their celebration, but the war was just beginning. The transformation happened in the space between one breath and the next. I stood in my kitchen, Margaret beside me, and felt 26 years of motherhood dissolve like sugar in rain. The tears that had flowed so freely dried up. My hands, which had shaken while viewing those wedding photos, became steady as surgical instruments. "No more crying," I said quietly, and Margaret actually took a step back. "Diane, you're scaring me a little." "Good. Maybe it's time I scared someone." I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer where I'd kept grocery lists and Brian's school schedules. At the top, I wrote one word: evidence. 30 years of hospital administration had taught me that documentation was everything. Every medication error, every patient complaint, every violation of protocol. It all came down to who had the better paper trail. Ashley thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been playing a much longer game than she realized. First things first, I said, my mind clicking into gear like a machine that had been dormant too long. I need a private investigator. Margaret's daughter at the courthouse, Janet, had mentioned something about Ashley's previous marriages. That was the thread to pull. But professionals cost money, and my savings had been depleted by years of supporting Brian. That's when I remembered my emergency fund. Hidden in a safety deposit box Brian didn't know about, accumulated quarter by quarter from recycling cans and picking up extra inventory shifts at the hospital. $3,000 in cash. My cushion against disaster. Well, disaster had arrived. Jimmy Castellano came recommended by our hospital's security chief. A former detective who'd gone private, he specialized in matrimonial investigations. I met him at a coffee shop downtown far from my neighborhood, where Ashley's network of believers might spot us. "Let me understand," Jimmy said, reviewing my notes. "Your daughter-in-law has been married before, at least twice according to preliminary records, both elderly men with assets. Both died within 2 years of marriage." Jimmy's eyebrows rose slightly. "And now she's married to your son, who's 27, but she's after something else this time. My house for starters." "Smart," Jimmy mused, varying the pattern. "Keeps authorities from connecting the dots." He studied the wedding photos on my phone. "This kind of operation takes practice. She's probably left a trail if we know where to look." While Jimmy began his investigation, I started my own reconnaissance. The beauty of being dismissed as a confused old woman was that no one paid attention to what you were doing. I began with the deed transfer, requesting copies from the county clerk. The notary seal caught my eye immediately. Robert K. Stevenson Commission, Bauer 451928. Something felt off about it. I'd had documents notarized at my bank for years. Their seals looked different somehow. A quick search revealed why Robert K. Stevenson's notary commission had expired 2 years ago. The document transferring my house was fraudulent. But I didn't celebrate. I documented. Photos of the seal copies of the expired commission, everything filed away in a new bank deposit box Brian didn't know existed. Next came the financial investigation. Using my access to old bank statements, I traced patterns. Regular transfers to Ashley's accounts, starting 6 months after they met. Small at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, then larger amounts. Brian's retirement fund liquidated. His car refinanced at a predatory rate. Credit cards I'd never known he had maxed out. The couple's registry for their wedding told another story. Guests had been directed to contribute to their house fund in lieu of gifts, but cross-referencing with property records showed they'd bought nothing. The money had vanished into Ashley's accounts like water into sand. Jimmy called with his first report 3 days into my investigation. "Your instincts were right. Ashley Brennan, formerly. Ashley Kowalski, formerly Ashley Martinez. First marriage at 19 to Theodore Kowalski, aged 72. He died of a heart attack 14 months later. Contested will, but she walked away with $400,000. "Let me guess," I said, taking notes. "Natural causes." "Officially, yes, but the man's daughter hired her own investigator, found evidence of medication tampering, not enough to prosecute, but enough to make noise. Ashley disappeared emerged 2 years later as Ashley Martinez, married to Robert Martinez, age 68. Another heart attack. Stroke this time, but similar pattern. Isolated from family, quick death, contested will. She got the house that time, sold it, and vanished again. And now she's Ashley Wellington Peterson. Here's the interesting part, Jimmy continued. She's still legally married to husband number 2. Robert Martinez isn't dead. He's in a nursing home in Delaware, advanced dementia, has been for 3 years. She's been collecting his Social Security checks. The room spun for a moment. My son had married a bigamist, a serial predator who specialized in destroying families for profit. There's more, Jimmy said. I found her mother, alive and well in Newark. Seems Ashley cut her off 10 years ago when she refused to participate in the Kowalski scheme. The mother might talk to you. Armed with this information, I crafted my plan. But first, I needed allies. Real ones, not the family who'd celebrated at Brian's wedding while I sat home alone. My Aunt Martha called that evening, 89 years old, sharp as a surgical scalpel, and worth roughly $8 million thanks to smart investments and 2 deceased husbands of her own. Diane Darling, I heard about Brian's wedding. Tacky business excluding you. It's worse than tacky Aunt Martha. I filled her in on everything, holding nothing back. The silence on her end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, the little bastard. And I mean that quite literally given the bigamy situation. I need your help, I said simply. Not money, just credibility. Oh, honey, you'll get more than that. I've been looking for some excitement since Harold passed. When do we start? The plan required me to become someone I'd never been an actress. For 26 years, I'd been transparently honest, wearing every emotion on my face. Now I had to convince Brian and Ashley that I was exactly what they'd painted me as. Confused, weak, desperate for their approval. I made the call on a Thursday evening, having practiced with Margaret until I had the quaver in my voice just right. Brian, I said when he answered. It's Mom. What do you want? His voice was cold, impatient. I wanted to apologize. You were right. I've been selfish about the wedding. I should be happy for you. Silence. Then Ashley's voice in the background. Is that your mother? Put her on speaker. Mom, you're on speaker, Brian announced. Hi, Ashley. Mrs. Peterson. I let my voice break slightly. I'm so sorry about my reaction. I've been thinking, and you're right. I have been confused lately. Maybe I do need help. I could practically hear Ashley's smile through the phone. Oh, Diane, we're not angry. We're concerned. Have you been taking your medications? Medications I didn't take for conditions I didn't have. Sometimes I forget, I admitted. See, Brian, I told you she needed supervision. Ashley's tone was triumphant. Then sweetly, Diane, why don't you come for dinner tomorrow? We have something important to discuss. The something I knew would be about putting me in a facility, signing over power of attorney, making my humiliation complete. That would be wonderful, I said, injecting pathetic gratitude into my voice. Can I bring dessert? Just yourself, Ashley said. We'll take care of everything else. After hanging up, I looked at Margaret. How was that? Terrifying. I almost believed you myself. Good, because tomorrow's performance would determine everything. I spent that night preparing, documents tucked into my purse, recording devices sewn into the lining, my Aunt Martha on standby, Jimmy on speed dial. But the real preparation was mental. I stood before my bedroom mirror practicing my confused old woman act, shoulders hunched, eyes slightly unfocused, hands trembling just enough to be noticeable. My name is Diane Peterson, I told my reflection. I'm 58 years old. I'm about to destroy the people who tried to destroy me, and I'm going to make it look like their idea. The poker face was perfect. 26 years of sacrifice had prepared me for this ultimate performance. Ashley thought she'd won when she'd stolen my son and my house. She was about to learn that she'd merely awakened something that had been sleeping since the day I'd buried my husband and decided to survive at any cost. The trap was set, the bait was ready. And I was done being prey. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, matching the facade of depression I wore like armor. I dressed carefully for dinner at Brian and Ashley's apartment. The same cardigan I'd worn to his high school graduation, slightly pilled, now paired with sensible slacks that had seen better days. Every detail calculated to reinforce their image of me as a declining, pathetic woman clinging to the past. Margaret drove me there, squeezing my hand before I got out. "You sure about this?" "Hidden recorders on," I whispered, tapping my purse. "Jimmy's parked 2 blocks away. If something goes wrong..." "I'll call the cavalry. Just be careful, Diane." The apartment building was new construction, all glass and steel, the kind of place that charged $4,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. The doorman looked through me as I entered, seeing exactly what Ashley had trained everyone to see: a forgettable older woman, probably someone's burden. Brian answered the door wearing a sweater I'd never seen designer labels visible like flags of his new identity. For just a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes. Then Ashley appeared behind him, and the stranger reasserted himself. "Mom," he said stiffly, "come in." Their apartment was staged like a magazine spread. White furniture that had never known a coffee spill, abstract art that cost more than my car, and not a single photo of Brian's childhood anywhere. I'd been erased from their aesthetic as thoroughly as from their lives. Diane. Ashley glided forward in a silk dress, playing the gracious hostess. "You look tired. Here, sit. Can I get you some water? Brian, get your mother some water. She needs to take her pills." I didn't correct her about the non-existent pills. Instead, I sat where directed, letting my hands shake slightly as I accepted the water glass. "This is such a beautiful place," I said, making my voice small. "I'm so proud of what you've built together." Brian and Ashley exchanged looks. The fish was taking the bait. Dinner was a calculated humiliation. They served salmon. They knew I was allergic, with a side of condescension. Ashley dominated the conversation, speaking slowly and loudly, as if I were deaf rather than allegedly confused. "So, Diane, how are you managing in that big house all alone?" It's getting harder." I admitted, which was true. Hard to live in a house I no longer owned. Sometimes I forget things, where I put my keys, whether I've paid bills. "We've noticed," Brian said, and there was something almost like concern in his voice. For a moment, I wondered if any part of him actually believed I was declining. "The missed payments are becoming a problem." Missed payments. "The rent, Mom." Ashley explained about the rent. I let confusion wash over my features. "But it's my house. Tom and I bought it." "We've been over this," Ashley said patiently, producing documents from a folder that had been conveniently waiting on the side table. "You signed the house over to us, remember, for the investment opportunity, and now you need to pay rent to continue living there." I stared at the papers, letting my bottom lip tremble. I don't remember." "Of course you don't." Ashley's sympathy was as fake as her Connecticut pedigree. "That's why we're worried. Brian, show her what else we found." Brian pulled out his phone, scrolling to what looked like security footage. "Mom, this is from last week. The pharmacy called saying you'd been there 3 times in one day trying to fill the same prescription." I watched the grainy footage of someone who looked vaguely like me from behind entering and exiting a pharmacy. Ashley's work, no doubt. She'd probably paid someone to wear similar clothes. That can't be me," I said weakly. "Denial is common with cognitive decline," Ashley said smoothly. "My grandmother went through the same thing, which is why we've been looking into some wonderful assisted living communities." There it was, the trap they thought they were setting. She produced glossy brochures for facilities, each more depressing than the last, but one caught my eye: Golden Years Manor, where coincidentally Robert Martinez, her still legal husband, currently resided. "This looks expensive," I murmured, playing directly into their hands. "Well, that's the thing." Brian leaned forward, his rehearsed concern back in place. "The house sale would cover it, and your Social Security pension, all of that would go toward your care. We'd manage everything for you so you wouldn't have to worry about confusing financial things anymore. You'd take care of everything." I made my voice hopeful, desperate. "Every detail," Ashley assured me. "We've already spoken to a lawyer about power of attorney. It's really the kindest thing letting family make these hard decisions for you. I let them see me fingering the brochures made my shoulders slump in defeat. I suppose, if you think it's best. We do, Brian said firmly. In fact, we think it's urgent. Your condition is deteriorating faster than we realized. There's just one small thing, I said hesitantly. I got a call from a lawyer yesterday about some inheritance. Both of them went still predators sensing opportunity. Inheritance. Ashley kept her voice casual, but I caught the gleam in her eye. My Uncle Robert. I didn't even know I had an Uncle Robert. But apparently, he passed last month and left me, well, the lawyer said $2 million, but I don't understand all the paperwork. The temperature in the room shifted. Brian leaned back, trying to appear nonchalant. Ashley's fingers twitched toward the folder of facility brochures. Mom, that's wonderful. Brian said, his voice warmer than it had been in months, but also complicated. You're right to be confused about the paperwork. Exactly, Ashley chimed in. Estate law is tricky. You could make costly mistakes. Brian, doesn't your friend Marcus specialize in estates? He does, actually. Mom, why don't we help you with this? Make sure everything's handled properly. I bit my lip, the picture of vulnerable uncertainty. Would you? I'm so worried I'll mess something up. The lawyer said I need to come to his office Monday with identification and, what did he call it? Proof of mental competency. Mental competency. Ashley's voice sharpened. Something about large inheritances requiring verification that the beneficiary is capable of managing the assets. He said it's standard, but what if I can't prove I'm competent? What if I really am as confused as you say? I watched them calculate, could practically see the wheels turning. If they moved too fast on the facility placement, I might be declared incompetent before the inheritance cleared. But if they waited... You know what, Mom? Brian said suddenly. Maybe we've been too hasty. You seem pretty clear tonight. Maybe it's just stress. Absolutely. Ashley agreed, her pivot so smooth it was almost admirable. Stress can mimic all sorts of conditions. Why don't we postpone the facility tour, focus on getting this inheritance sorted first? Really, I let hope bloom across my face. You don't think I need immediate help? Let's take it one day at a time, Ashley said magnanimously. In fact, why don't you come to dinner Sunday? We could go over the inheritance paperwork together, make sure you understand everything. And maybe, Brian added, we could discuss you staying in the house a bit longer, until everything's settled. No mention of rent now. Amazing how $2 million imaginary dollars could cure their concern about my mental state. I stayed another hour letting them fuss over me, their attention proportional to their greed. They offered me dessert. Suddenly remembering I was allergic to salmon, apologizing profusely for the mix-up. Brian even walked me to the door, helping me with my coat, like he hadn't done in years. Take care of yourself, Mom, he said, and for a second I heard real emotion there. We want you healthy for Monday's appointment. Of course they did. Can't inherit from the incompetent. In the elevator down, I allowed myself one moment of bitter satisfaction. They'd swallowed the story completely. But as I emerged onto the street where Margaret waited, I felt the weight of what came next. Sunday dinner would be the performance of my life, because it wouldn't just be Brian and Ashley at that table. It would be time for all the masks to come off. I slid into Margaret's car, pulling out the recorder to check it had captured everything. Their voices came through clear as crystal, discussing my deterioration, the facility placement, the power of attorney, evidence of elder abuse, conspiracy, and fraud. How'd it go? Margaret asked. They think they're reeling in a confused old woman with a surprise inheritance, I said, finally dropping the act. Sunday they'll learn exactly what they caught. You sure you want to do this? Once it starts, there's no going back. I thought about 26 years of sacrifice, about being excluded from my own son's wedding, about the house they'd stolen and the dignity they'd tried to strip away. Margaret. I said quietly, it started the day they decided I wasn't a person anymore, just an obstacle to overcome, Sunday isn't the beginning of anything. Then what is it? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. The end. Jimmy called as we drove home. He'd followed Ashley after I'd left. She'd gone straight to a lawyer's office, the kind that stayed open late for special clients. The kind that would draw up power of attorney documents on a Friday night for the right price. They were moving fast, but not fast enough. Because what Ashley didn't know was that Uncle Robert wasn't just a fiction. Aunt Martha had legally created a trust in that name, funded with enough real money to make the inheritance legitimate if anyone checked. The lawyer they'd meet on Monday was real, too, a former prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases. The trap they thought they'd escaped by letting me stay competent until Monday, they'd walked right into its bigger, sharper-toothed cousin. Sunday dinner would be served with a side of justice, and for once I wouldn't be the one choking it down. Sunday arrived crisp and bright, one of those perfect autumn days that made everything seem possible. I dressed with care, not the shabby cardigan this time, but my best navy suit, the one I wore to hospital board meetings. My hair was styled, my makeup subtle but present. I looked like what I was, a professional woman in full command of her faculties. Margaret helped me load my car with 2 boxes of documents. Everything we'd uncovered, every piece of evidence, every recording, the final props for the last act. "You sure you don't want me to come?" she asked for the 10th time. "This needs to be just family," I said, checking my watch. "But everyone else should be in position by now." The everyone else was quite a list. Jimmy, the private investigator, Aunt Martha and her lawyer, the FBI agents Jimmy had contacted about Ashley's interstate fraud, the state prosecutor specializing in elder abuse, a detective from the bigamy unit, and at Aunt Martha's insistence, a reporter from the local news who'd been investigating a string of elder fraud cases, all waiting for my signal. I arrived at Brian and Ashley's building at exactly 2 o'clock. This time, the doorman held the door, his demeanor respectful. Amazing what confidence and a good suit could do. Brian answered, looking relaxed, casual in khakis and a polo shirt. The son I remembered from lazy Sunday afternoons before Ashley, before all of this. "Mom, you look great," he said, seeming genuinely surprised. "I feel great," I replied, stepping inside. Clear-headed for the first time in months. Ashley emerged from the kitchen, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. I wasn't playing the part anymore, and she sensed it. "Diane, you look different." Do I must be the relief of finally understanding everything clearly? I set my purse down, the one without the recorder this time. We were past the point of hidden evidence. "Is that paperwork from the lawyer?" Brian asked, eyeing the boxes I'd brought. "In a way. Should we sit? There's a lot to discuss." They exchanged glances but gestured to the dining table, the same one where they'd served me allergens and lies just 2 days ago. Ashley poured wine, her movements less fluid than usual. "So," she began, "about the inheritance." "There is no inheritance," I said conversationally. "Uncle Robert never existed." The silence was beautiful. Brian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Ashley went very still, calculating her next move. "Mom," Brian started, "you said—" I lied. I pulled out the first folder, something I learned from watching you two. But I'm not very good at it. Not like Ashley here. Or should I call you Ashley Brennan Kowalski Martinez? Ashley's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, then let me refresh your memory." I spread photos across the table. Wedding photos, but not from last week. Theodore Kowalski, your first husband, died mysteriously after changing his will. Robert Martinez, your second husband. Oh wait, he's still alive, isn't he? Just tucked away in a nursing home while you collect his Social Security. Brian. Ashley said urgently, "Your mother is having an episode. We should call someone." "Who would you call? Ashley, the police? They're already here." I pulled out my phone, sending the pre-typed message. In fact, they should be coming up right about... The doorbell rang. Brian stood, confusion and growing alarm on his face. "Mom, what did you do?" "What I should have done months ago. Protected myself." He opened the door to find two FBI agents with badges displayed. Behind them, the state prosecutor, the detective, and Jimmy, who gave me a small nod. Ashley Brennan Peterson. The lead agent stepped inside. You're under arrest for bigamy, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. This is insane, Ashley shrieked as they cuffed her. Brian, tell them your mother is senile, she doesn't know what she's saying. Brian looked between us, his world crashing down. Mom, what's happening? I stood gathering my strength for the hardest part. What's happening is that your wife is a serial predator who marries men for their assets, and you helped her try to do it to me. I didn't know. The words exploded from him. Mom, I swear I didn't know about her other marriages. Maybe not, I conceded. But you knew about the house. You knew those papers weren't for collateral. You watched her gaslight me into thinking I was losing my mind. You excluded me from your wedding to humiliate me. And why? Because she convinced you I was an embarrassment, or because you were always willing to trade your mother for a lifestyle upgrade. The prosecutor stepped forward. Mr. Peterson, you're also under arrest for fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. As they cuffed my son, my baby boy, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, I waited for the pain. Instead, I felt only a sad relief. The house transfer was fraudulent, I told Brian as they led him past. The notary's license was expired. My lawyer already filed to reverse it. Everything you thought you'd gained is gone. Mom, he whispered, and now finally I saw real fear in his eyes. Mom, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said quietly. But sorry doesn't undo attempted theft. Sorry doesn't erase the months of cruelty. Sorry doesn't make you the son I raised. They led them both away, Ashley still shrieking about her innocence, Brian silent and pale. The agent stayed behind to collect evidence while I walked through the apartment one last time. All that sterile beauty built on lies and other people's pain. Aunt Martha was waiting in the lobby when I came down regal at 89 in her fur coat and diamonds. How do you feel? She asked, linking her arm through mine. Empty, I admitted, but also free. The news story broke that evening. Ashley's previous victims came forward emboldened by her arrest. The scope of her crimes was staggering. 6 marriages over 15 years, millions in stolen assets, elderly victims across 3 states. She'd been building to a bigger score, and I'd been perfect, a lonely mother with a paid-off house and a son she'd do anything for. Brian's part was smaller but no less damaging. The prosecutor offered him a deal to testify against Ashley and serve 2 years instead of 5. He took it sending me a letter from jail that I read once and burned. I convinced myself I was protecting you, he wrote, that you needed someone to make decisions for you. But really, I just wanted what she promised, an easier life, a better future. I traded my mother for a lie. I'll regret it forever. Maybe he would. Maybe prison would teach him what 26 years of love hadn't. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I sold the house, my house legally mine again, and used the money to start fresh. Not in some coastal town like I'd dreamed, but right here in a smaller place perfect for one person who no longer needed spare rooms for ungrateful children. The twist came 6 months later. Aunt Martha, who'd enjoyed the drama so much she'd started attending court proceedings, like entertainment, passed away peacefully in her sleep. She left me everything with a note. For the woman who finally learned her worth. Spend it on yourself for once. $8 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of arriving just when I'd learned I didn't need anyone else's wealth to be whole. I kept my job at the hospital but started a foundation for elder fraud victims. Margaret ran it with me using her financial expertise to help people recover what they'd lost. We caught a dozen Ashley types in our first year alone. On a warm Thursday evening, exactly 1 year after that horrible morning, when I'd learned about the wedding, Margaret and I sat on my new deck overlooking the garden I'd always wanted. Any regrets? She asked, raising her wine glass. I thought about Brian, who still had 18 months left on his sentence. about the grandchildren I'd never have, about the traditional happy ending I'd once wanted, son and mother reconciled, family restored. No, I said finally, I regret what he became. I regret being blind for so long, but I don't regret choosing myself when he'd already chosen to throw me away. The doorbell rang, interrupting our quiet moment. I found William at my door, the widower from my grief support group, holding a bouquet of daisies. I know we said coffee next week, he said shyly, but I saw these and thought of you. Is that silly? Not at all, I said, accepting the flowers. Sweet William, who'd lost his wife after 50 years of real partnership, who understood that love shouldn't require you to disappear. Would you like to join us for wine? As he settled onto the deck, chatting easily with Margaret, I realized something profound. I'd spent 26 years believing sacrifice equaled love, that giving everything, including myself, made me a good mother. But real love, the kind William had shared with his wife, the kind Margaret showed me, the kind I was learning to show myself, didn't demand self-erasure. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Peterson. This is Janet from the FBI. Thought you'd want to know. Ashley was sentenced today. 20 years federal, no parole. Your testimony made the difference. I deleted the message and put the phone away. Ashley was the past. Brian was the past. Even my old self, the woman who would have visited him in prison, put money in his commissary account, waited faithfully for his release, was the past. The future sat on my deck, sharing wine and laughter on a beautiful evening. The future was choosing myself every day and discovering that I was more than enough. A toast. Margaret proposed raising her glass. To Diane, who learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building a life so good they become irrelevant. We clinked glasses as the sun set over my garden, painting the sky in shades of freedom. Standing on my deck with people who truly valued me, I reflected on the journey. 25 years of sacrifice had taught me to give, but it took betrayal to teach me something more important: when to stop. Real love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your dignity, security, or worth. It doesn't require you to become smaller so others can feel bigger. The day I stopped being a doormat wasn't the day they arrested Brian and Ashley. It was the day I chose to see my own worth through my eyes instead of theirs. And that choice, to value myself, to demand respect, to refuse to disappear for anyone's comfort, that was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. The dishes could wait, the future couldn't. Dear viewers, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? When someone you love becomes someone you don't recognize, how do you find the strength to choose yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own worth, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they matter, that their sacrifices are seen, please share this story with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we deserve to be more than supporting characters in our own lives. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, the love that asks you to disappear isn't love at all. Until next time, this is Diane reminding you that you are always worth choosing.